You may be a bit tired of hearing from me this week, and I'm sorry from that if you are. Matthew's Gospel, though, is something that's particularly important to me. So I want to make sure that I cover something from all of these major collections of teaching that might be helpful to you in your reading and your reflecting. Something that all of the Gospels, especially, well, the Synoptic Gospels, share in common is an idea where Jesus spends some time shortly before his death engaged in eschatological teaching. When we talk about eschatology or an eschaton, that's an endpoint. It's a terminus. It's a thing where everybody ends up. It's the end of things as they are now and the beginning of God's new age. The Jews at the time of Jesus had a strong belief that at the coming of the Messiah, it would end the current age of Gentile domination of the world and end the current age of spiritual darkness and bring in a messianic age where everything was right, everything was the way it should be, and the lion lays down with the lamb and the leopard with the goat, and they don't hurt each other, and everything is made right, and people live this endless life under the reign of a glorious political Messiah in a physical reality. That's what they were kind of thinking would happen. Jesus really says, I'm rejecting that expectation. I'm doing something else. And Jesus does do some teaching about eschatology. Particularly, in Matthew, he talks about the idea of judgment and reward. The idea of judgment, sometimes we think about that as like hellfire and brimstone. And, just keep an open mind as you look through these texts in Matthew 24 and Matthew 25. While I won't comment on Matthew 24 in particular, I will say this about it. Jesus is teaching about not knowing the day or the hour, and that nobody knows that, not even him at that time. It's going to be in an unexpected time when things come to an end. But he gives some hints about that. And really the idea is that Jesus could come at any time to enact the final judgment of God and to bring an end to things as they are and to make all things new as they will be. So he introduces this saying, "Who is a wise and faithful servant, whom his master has set over his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is that servant who his master finds doing what he ought to do when he comes. I say to you, he will set him over all his possessions. But if that wicked servant says to himself, 'My master is delayed,' and begins to beat his fellow servants and mistreat them, and drinks with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on an hour that he does not expect, and an hour he does not know, and cut him in pieces, and place him with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So the early Christians are believing, we don't know when Jesus is coming back. We don't know when this judgment's going to take place. So we live each day as if it could be today. We want to do the best that we can. Now, Matthew's gospel is not shy about the language of reward. God notices the things that people do. In the Sermon on the Mount, he says, even if you give somebody a cup of cold water in Jesus' name, there's a reward that you will never lose for doing even the smallest act of simple kindness, because you're doing that as part of your Christian witness or as because of a response to what Jesus has done in your life. There is an ultimate reward, and there are three parables. And again, Matthew likes doublets and triplets. Here's a triplet of parables, Matthew 25. Here's the first one, and it's also kind of the hardest one. "Then the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet a bridegroom. 5 were foolish, and 5 were wise. For when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them, but the wise took flasks of oil with them along with their lamps. The bridegroom was delayed, and they all became drowsy and slept. And at midnight there was a cry, 'The bridegroom comes, come out to meet him.' Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the wise, 'Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out.' But the wise answered, saying, 'There will not be enough for us and for you. Go rather to the merchants and buy for yourselves.' And while they were going to buy, the bridegroom came, and those who were ready went in with him to the marriage feast, and the door was shut. Afterward the other virgins came also, saying, 'Lord, Lord, open to us.' But he said, 'Truly I say to you, I do not know you. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour.'" Of the three parables, this one is the most complicated to understand. It's also the one that's most debatable in any way that we choose to interpret it. Now, parables tend to have things that represent other things, but there was apparently a custom at this time. It was sort of like a game that people played, where you didn't really know when the groom was coming to pick up the bride and take her home. And weddings at that time were like a week's festivities, and everybody, on your wedding night, kind of sat outside and cheered you on while you consummated and all that kind of creepy to us today, but that was cool to them. And weddings were, a massive celebration where for that week the bride and the groom, didn't have to work, and they were the prince and princess of their courts, and it was a remarkable time for them that they spent with some of their closest friends. But part of this involved like a joke, like the bridesmaids were supposed to wait. They didn't know when the bridegroom was coming, and then they'd all get to go into kind of the party with the bridegroom and with the bridegroom and his party of guys that were with him. So it was sort of like a social custom that was just kind of fun. And you have 5 that are prepared to meet him when he comes. So they have everything they need to fully participate in this party. They've prepared themselves to be ready. And 5 who haven't. The best explanation of this I can give is being ready to meet God when we go to him or he comes to us is an intentional process. It's not something that we do accidentally and all of a sudden we're prepared to meet Jesus and to be welcomed into that kind of feast and those festivities. It's something that requires intentionality, preparation, and deliberate decisions to be ready to serve him when those opportunities come, or we may miss the chance that we later wish we had. And this one, is debatable. We could look at this in other ways. We could say, isn't it selfish they wouldn't share? There's a lot of ways you can look at this parable, but it's the hardest of the two. And the best I can explain it is the idea that we are each responsible for our own preparation to be ready to meet God and to welcome him in the ways in which he comes. Or we may find ourselves shut out of that which we most long to be part of in our heart of hearts. These next ones are a little easier. It will be like a man going on a journey who called to his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, so that's an enormous fortune. To another he gave 2 talents, and to another he gave 1. And he gave each of them money to manage according to their ability to use it. So there's some, they're not given a fair shot. They're all given a different amount, but they're given a fortune to use on their master's behalf equitably according to their ability, something they should have been able to use. To the one who was most able, more was given. To the one with moderate ability, a moderate amount was given. To the one who had the least ability, a fortune, a talent was given for him to use and invest on his master's behalf. And his master felt like he had the capacity to do it and do it well. The one who had received, and then the master went away on the journey. So he says, here's what's mine. I'm going to entrust it to you. I'm going to be gone for a while. Use this on my behalf while I'm gone. The one who had received 5 talents went at once and began trading with them. So he engages in commercial activity and commerce with them. And ultimately, he made 5 talents more. So he started with 5, he ended up with 10. He doubled his master's investment in him. So also, the one who had 2 talents was able to earn 2 talents more. But the one who had received just the 1 talent went and dug a hole and hid his master's money in the ground. He had the capacity to use it. He was given a fortune. He was entrusted something very precious, the amount of money that most people would never see in a lifetime. Trusted to use it. And he digs a hole for it. And he puts it down to the ground. He buries it in a mason jar in the backyard. After a long time, the master of those servants came to settle accounts. He who had received the 5 came forward, bringing 5 talents more, and says, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents, and I have made you 5 more. Master's response, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I'm going to put you over much. Come and enter into my joy. So let's party, dude. Celebrate with me. Enter into what makes me happy. To the one who had 2 talents came forward and said, Master, you gave me 2, and behold, I've made you 2 more. And the master responds identically. He is identically pleased with the one who has only made him 2 talents with the one who made him 5. And he says the exact same words to him, welcoming him into joy, welcoming him into the celebration with him. Then came the man who had received 1 talent, saying, Master, I knew you were a difficult man, a hard man, a harsh man. You reap crops where you didn't plant any, and you gather in wheat where you scattered no seed. So he's like, man, I knew you were hardcore. I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. Oh, so you believe that I reap where I don't sow and gather where I've scattered no seed. Then, if you believe that, you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, so that at my coming I should have at least received my own with interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. Cast this worthless servant into the outer darkness, in a place of weeping and gnashing of teeth. What's this all about? Jesus has given to everybody, God has given to everybody something precious, a life, gifts, things that we're good at, a capacity to touch other people, to forward the investment that God has made in us, to bless others, to help others. This is not about economics. It's about using what God has invested in us personally, and that we have a responsibility to do that. And that ultimately, when we stand before God, something that He's looking for is, how did we use what He's invested in us? Did it make a difference for somebody else? And I want you to notice here, one guy had higher capacity and he made more money than the one who just had 2 talents. But Jesus was or the king in the parable, was identically pleased with both of them. The one who he gets ticked at is the one who says, I knew you're hardcore and you're hard and nothing pleases you, so I just dug a hole in the ground so I wouldn't mess it up. There's no excuse for not investing and not putting to work the investment that God has made in us, because it's precious. It was entrusted to us, and He knew we could make the most of it. Some people are really hard on themselves, and they hold themselves back in life because they feel like, I just screw everything up. I'm going to mess everything up. Even if God has given me this gift, I'm not good enough to do anything with it. Jesus counters that kind of thinking here. And He says the only kind of judgment for people, trying and failing is okay. Not trying, that's what's inexcusable. Especially if we try to hang that on a belief that we could have never pleased, this master that God is. I often wonder if God is not more like, a parent who, a little child comes to him and says, I want to buy you a present. Can you give me some money so I can buy you a present? And, if you've ever had your kid do that to you, it absolutely delights you, and it's hilarious and it's funny and it's just warped. Yes, here's something so you can buy me something. But I think that God is more easily pleased with His children's efforts and intentions to serve Him, and trying to hide behind a belief that He's judgmental and we'll never be able to live up to His standards, so that's why we didn't try. Jesus says that doesn't cut the mustard, that each person is responsible for using and putting into work in real life the investment that God has made into them. And that's something that, at eschatological judgment, each person will answer for. And that's kind of scary. But here's another one. Here's the final parable of judgment in Matthew 25. When the Son of Man comes in His glory, and all the angels with Him, He will sit on His glorious throne, and before Him will be gathered all the nations, so all people. He will separate people from one another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. This was a common pastoral scene in Palestine at that time. Sheep have lots of wool. They're okay to be outside at night. They have wool, it's coated with lanolin, they don't get wet, they don't really get cold, they're fine to stay outside. Goats need to be taken inside to a warmer place at night. When the sun goes down, the goats need a warmer place, and the sheep are okay outside of that place. He's separating them. He'll say to the sheep, put them on my right hand, to the goats on my left. And the king will say to those on the right, the sheep, come you who are blessed by my Father, and inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. He says, so come on in, you're coming into whatever heaven is, this kingdom of God, this good stuff. Come on in, we made this ready for you before the world was ever made. This was the place that was made for people like you. Here's the justification as to why they're welcomed in. Verse 35, I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you gave me clothes. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. The righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did we see you a stranger and welcome you, or naked and give you clothes? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and come visit you? And the king will say, truly I say to you, as you did it to the least of these, my brothers, You did it to me. Then he'll say to those on the left, Depart from me, you cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. So you're going off into a thing that was never made for you. But you live like the devil, so now you're going to get your due. For I was hungry, and you gave me no food. I was thirsty, you gave me no drink. I was a stranger, and you did not welcome me, naked, and you gave me no clothes, sick and in prison, and you never visited me. Then they will say, Lord, when did we see you hungry and not give you food? Or you thirsty? Or you a stranger? Or you naked? Or you sick and not minister to you? Then he'll say to them, When you did it not to the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you did not do it from me, to me. These will go away into eternal punishment, but the righteous into eternal life. A lot of people get bothered by this because they're like, is Jesus talking about works salvation? I thought it was just, you believe in Jesus and that's what takes you to heaven. But a salvation that's by grace through faith that doesn't work maybe isn't. Salvation by grace through faith always has to express itself in the character of a life if it's real. We don't get to be the fruit inspector for God and wonder if somebody else's claims to know him are real or not. But the idea here is that it matters so much to God what we do to other human beings made in his image, other human beings that are the object of his love. That what we do to them or what we withhold from them, God takes that personally. It's like we did it to him. And there's some answering for that. Let me give you a real life example of how this works. I don't know, most of you probably don't have kids. But when it comes to me personally, you can say anything you want to about me, and I've gotten thick-skinned over the years, and I just don't care. I'll get over it. But if you do something to my kid, if you do something to my wife, I'll come at you like a spider monkey, like crazy psycho, and have to tone myself down. You're a pastor. You represent Jesus. You need to act nice. Not that I ever have to do that very much. But, we were at a daycare facility that kind of treated our child bad when he was really young. And it was all I could do not to want to punch that lady in the face because she did that to my kid. We take that at a very deep place. God does that for all of us. When we do something kind for somebody else, he remembers and he never forgets. And he takes that so personally as if we did it from him. When we withhold from another person what they need from us, whether that's a physical need like food or shelter, we don't do anything to help. When we know about their need and we don't ever come to visit them, we don't come to be their companion in their sorrow. He says, you chose to withhold that from me by not doing it to them. The ethic of Matthew's gospel is what we do to another person or don't do. God takes that so personally as if it's him. The character of a person's life, is it like God? Is it the one who's ministering to the least of these, who are puzzled saying, when have we ever seen you in need, Lord? You've never been in need. You've seen the people I love that way, and I took that personally that you took care of them. Lord, if we had seen you in need, say the other crowd, somebody important like you, we would have helped them. Jesus said, when you chose not to do it to the least of these persons, the small ones, who are the objects of my love, you withheld it from me. Now get your reward. Reward in Matthew's gospel is about the fact that God notices human life. He notices every good thing we ever do, everything we do as an expression of faith and trust in him. He also notices the good that we do not, that which we leave undone that we ought to do, and that which we do that we ought not. And even for those that God forgives, we're still judged according to works. I'm not going to be here and be like, hey, you prayed a prayer at Bible school when you were 8, but you've lived like the devil ever since. You're hellbound for sure. That's not my place to judge. But what I am saying that this gospel says is you can't call him Lord, Lord, and not do what he says, not follow his example, to use Jesus' own language from an earlier point in the gospel. These are some pretty challenging teachings, but understand that the early Christians were eschatologically oriented, and maybe Christians today should be as well. They had a real belief in a coming judgment that would set the world to rights. Judgment is not about people finally getting punished in the way that they deserve. It's God setting the world right, even if the process of doing that is ugly. So that's another great collection of teaching and great ideas that we find in Matthew's Gospel.